In 1978, a 15-year-old girl stood on the side of a California highway with her thumb out, believing the world was still mostly good. She wasn't reckless, she wasn't careless, she was just young. When a man in his 30s pulled over and offered her a ride, he looked ordinary. Calm voice, relaxed posture, no visible threat, the kind of face you wouldn't remember twice. She got in. At first, everything felt normal. They talked about music, about traveling, about where she was headed. He smiled often. He asked questions. He seemed patient. But predators don't always look dangerous. Sometimes they look polite. After some time, the highway signs became unfamiliar. The traffic disappeared. The cities grew distant in the rearview mirror. The car turned off the main road and onto a stretch of dirt that led into emptiness. That was the moment fear replaced doubt. She asked where they were going. He didn't answer. Instead, he kept driving until there was nothing around them but silence. Then the attack began. It was sudden and violent. He overpowered her quickly. She fought with everything she had, but she was 15, and he was stronger. The sun moved across the sky as hours passed. There were no witnesses, no help, no escape. When evening approached, he made a decision that would define this crime as one of the most horrifying acts of cruelty in American history. He decided she would not leave alive. In an act so brutal it defies understanding, he severed both of her arms. He believed that without them, she would bleed out within minutes. He dragged her broken body toward a 30-foot cliff and pushed her over the edge. He stood there briefly, listening. When he heard nothing, he left. He believed it was over. But at the bottom of that cliff, she was still breathing. Her body was in shock. Blood soaked the dirt beneath her. Every nerve screamed. It would have been easy to close her eyes and surrender to the darkness creeping in, but something inside her refused. Instead of giving up, she pressed the exposed bone of her arms into the soil to slow the bleeding. The pain was indescribable, but survival demanded action. She forced herself to stand. Above her was the cliff he had thrown her from. Behind her was certain death. She chose to climb. With no hands, she dug the ends of her arms into the dirt and rock. She slipped. She fell. She tried again. Every movement tore through muscle and bone. The climb should have been impossible, but inch by inch she rose. By the time she reached the top, darkness had settled across the landscape, and she still wasn't safe. Weak, dizzy, and barely conscious, she began to walk. For miles, she moved along the roadside, bleeding and disoriented, until a pair of headlights appeared in the distance. A couple driving home saw what they first thought was an animal staggering near the road. As they got closer, they realized it was a teenage girl, covered in blood, with no arms, still alive. They rushed her to the hospital where doctors worked through the night to save her life. Many later said surviving that level of blood loss alone was nearly impossible. Surviving the fall was unlikely. Surviving the climb was unimaginable. Yet she had done all three. When she regained consciousness, investigators asked if she remembered anything. She remembered everything. His face, his voice, the direction he drove, the dirt road, even details about his vehicle. Trauma had not erased her memory. It had sharpened it. Police tracked him down and arrested him. During questioning, he showed little emotion. He seemed confident that even if she survived, she would never fully recover. He believed the damage he inflicted had destroyed her life permanently. He underestimated her once again. In court, she faced him directly. She did not hide. She did not avoid eye contact. She described what he did in clear, steady detail. The courtroom sat in silence as the reality of his actions settled over the jury. He was convicted and sentenced to prison. But survival was only the beginning of her story. Recovery required learning how to live again without arms. She was fitted with prosthetics. She endured surgeries, physical therapy, and relentless adjustment. Every basic task had to be relearned. And then she chose to create. She discovered painting. Using her prosthetic arms, she began turning emotion into art. Her work reflected pain, resilience, and transformation. Instead of being remembered solely as a victim of brutality, she became a symbol of endurance. When people later asked how she survived that night, her answer was simple. She decided she would. Not because she wasn't afraid, not because it didn't hurt, but because she refused to let the man who tried to erase her control the ending of her story. He believed a cliff would silence her forever. Instead, it became the place where her strength was proven. This isn't just a crime story. It's a reminder that the human will to live can overpower unimaginable cruelty. Because sometimes, survival is the loudest form of justice. And sometimes, the person left for dead becomes impossible to forget. For him, this wasn't just violence. It was control. Control over whether she spoke again. Control over whether she existed. Control over how the story ended. Some criminals don't just want to hurt someone, they want to erase them, to prove they have absolute power. But what he didn't understand was that power is fragile, and survival can destroy it. Every instinct in her body screamed to stop. Her vision blurred, her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She could feel warmth leaving her body with every drop of blood. She thought about her family. She thought about whether they would ever know what happened. And then another thought came. If she stopped moving, he would win. So she moved. Not because she believed she would survive, but because she refused to surrender. Sometimes survival isn't hope. Sometimes it's defiance. Doctors would later say that adrenaline alone could not explain it. There had to be something else. Mental resistance, an internal refusal to shut down. The human brain, when pushed to the edge, can choose survival in ways science still struggles to measure. And that night, hers did. But even inside a courtroom, justice can feel incomplete. A sentence on paper does not return what was taken. It does not erase memory. It does not undo fear. And yet, watching him led away in handcuffs was proof of something important. He failed. He failed to silence her. He failed to erase her. He failed to control the ending. At first, holding a brush felt impossible. Balance had to be relearned. Precision had to be rebuilt. But every stroke on canvas became a quiet rebellion. Color replaced darkness. Movement replaced helplessness. Creation replaced destruction. She was no longer defined by what he took. She was defined by what she built afterward. There are moments in history where cruelty tries to write the final chapter, where evil believes it has absolute authority, where a cliff, a weapon, or a decision is meant to end everything. But sometimes, the story continues, not because it's easy, not because it's fair, but because someone refuses to let it stop there. The world expected silence at the bottom of that cliff. Instead, it got resilience. It got strength. It got a survivor. And that is why this story still matters. Because survival is not just living. It is resistance. It is proof that even when darkness does its worst, it cannot always win. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe. Because here, we don't glorify criminals. We honor the strength of those who outlived them. And there are more stories the world needs to hear.